Okay, so this is another one, little way back in the time machine. So it's tied to our number two. So number two, or my number two, was the Bills traded OJ, and they end up drafting Jim Kelly with the picks that came as a result. So unfortunately, when they drafted Jim Kelly, he didn't want to play for them either, just like Greg Cousineau. He ends up going to the USFL. He plays with the Houston Gamblers because he's a Pennsylvania guy, but he played his college football in Miami, and he just didn't want to play in the cold. So it's a familiar complaint about guys playing with Buffalo. But he absolutely lights it up in the USFL, and he probably would have stayed there for a long time, but the league folded, and Buffalo still had his rights. So what ends up happening is during the 3 years that they still had Jim Kelly's rights, but he was, playing in the USFL, that the Bills were terrible. They go 2-14 in 83 and 84, and they go 4-12 in 85. And because they were so bad, they were essentially tanking while also having a Hall of Fame quarterback on the books. And they were able to draft guys like Bruce Smith with the number one overall pick, Frank Reich, who was a big player during this time, backup quarterback, greatest comeback in NFL history. They drafted Andre Reed, a Hall of Famer. They also draft two great players on defense in Shane Conlon and Nate Odom. So basically, the fact that Jim Kelly snubbed this team ended up being a huge blessing in disguise because they were able to stockpile all these picks and draft all these great players. And basically, if Jim Kelly doesn't snub them, they don't make all these Super Bowls because ostensibly they're going to be a better team, and they don't, they can't tank and draft. Well, they definitely don't draft Bruce Smith number one because they're a better team than that. So, yeah, basically, if my what if is if Jim Kelly doesn't snub the Bills, we don't get these 4 heartbreaks, but we also probably don't get these that dynasty team.
So this is a really good one because it was. I remember watching the 30 for 30 episode on Buffalo and how
the four falls of Buffalo.
4 falls of Buffalo, yeah, really good one. And I remember Jim Kelly snubbing them and found that to be peculiar. And we've seen quarterbacks do this throughout history. I'm just not playing there. I think he was one of few, though, that actually did end up, after saying that initially, playing for the team that drafted him. I think John Elway, a couple other guys, said they didn't want to play for certain teams and then didn't. But he actually
Eli Manning.
Yeah, Eli Manning. He actually did come back to Buffalo. So that part is interesting.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I'm sure the Bills fans and the Bills front office probably tearing their hair out at yet another top pick, snubbing them. But it worked out really well. I mean, Bill Polian he's the GM at the time. He's the architect of these teams, and he was able to capitalize on all these high draft picks just because Jim Kelly said, I'm not playing for you guys.
Yeah, Bill Polian built a hell of a resume as a result, too, right? 6-time executive of the year, Peyton Manning, etc. So,
yeah, I mean, if you look at his track record those years, it's remarkable. The number of Hall of Famers and just incredible players that he drafted over that time. He definitely earned those awards.
Yeah, this is a really good one because, again, it takes a mistake or some sort of, what was a negative at the time into a positive, and how if that seemingly didn't happen, we don't have the run. So it's two different players that didn't want to play for the Bills end up causing a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, and then you could argue it was 3 because OJ didn't want to play there either, and he wanted a massive contract. He wasn't happy with the front office. But yeah, it's not all heartbreak in Buffalo,
Right.
Clouds with some silver linings here on their